Okay, so we're coming into the Christmas season. Everything Jesus related, or apparently. So today's sermon, is Reflections on Jesus. Now, if you're anything like me, human being, living, breathing, no. If you're like me, then you probably don't have a very active spiritual life. I mean, I pray a little, I read a little, but that's pretty much it. That's my daily reality. So Sunday service for me is an opportunity to receive God's Word. And if that's your situation, then today you're not necessarily going to get God's Word. You're going to get reflections on Jesus as interpreted by James Chisholm. So my apologies ahead of time. I hope that you can get something from this, because I'm always interested in hearing what other people think and how other people feel about certain topics of importance. And so hopefully you'll go away from this sermon having understood something more about me, but more importantly, having understood something different that you may not have considered about Jesus, the Messiah. Now, I'd like to start by asking the question, what is the purpose of the Messiah? And then I want to go on to discussing Jesus the man, and then wrap up with Jesus' legacy and significance. So, first of all, what is the purpose of the Messiah? We understand that God's original intention was to have Adam and Eve, the original human ancestors, perfect themselves in love, become husband and wife, and create a family centered on God. We know that didn't happen, and the symbolic story is laid out to us in the book of Genesis. So then, God's providence of restoration is what has God been trying to do to salvage this situation? And that's pretty much human history. So the purpose of the Messiah is to become the true parent of humankind, to be born as a man, grow up, perfect their love, raise up or have a woman be raised up by God simultaneously, perfect themselves in love, marry, and establish a family centered on God. But there's all kinds of trials for that to happen. And primarily, in order for that to happen, it depends on the Messiah's responsibility, those individuals chosen as the true parents, and it depends on the responsibility of humans to follow them or not. And so therefore, the success or failure or the speed of the Messiah's mission hinges on the Messiah fulfilling their responsibility and people doing the same. So that's why it gives me great consolation raising teenage children to know that when they fall short of fulfilling their responsibility, it's not necessarily my fault as a parent. Because God is the source of love. God is the ultimate being of love. God was giving Adam and Eve tremendous amounts of support and love. I mean, when we think about the Garden of Eden, what do we think about? We're thinking about an ideal environment, an environment that supports people's spiritual growth. So despite all those wonderful things, Adam and Eve still fell away. Now, is that a reflection on God's poor parenting standards? I don't think so. That is a reflection on the fact that Adam and Eve failed to fulfill their portion of responsibility. And the reason why God set it up that way is because God had to give human beings a portion of responsibility in order to achieve love. I remember going to Disney World once, and I went into this toy store, and I picked up this little teddy bear. And every time you squeeze the teddy bear, do you know what it says? It says, "I love you." And the first time you hear it, it's like, "Oh, that's cute." The second time you squeeze this bear, and it goes, "I love you." And the third time you squeeze it, it says, "I love you." And then you start squeezing it a little bit more. It starts to get irritating and annoying because you realize this is empty. This thing is programmed to say, "I love you." And everyone here recognizes that even though machines and certain kind of animated objects are programmed to serve, and we appreciate them, but that's not love. Love has to be freely given, and in order for that to exist, God had to give human beings free will. And he had to back off from interfering with that responsibility of human beings. And it's the violation of that responsibility that caused the fall, not because God didn't give enough love. So it gives me great consolation as a parent that when my child/children behave in ways that I cannot describe here using good language, that is not necessarily my fault. Now, of course, I'm not a perfected human being, unfortunately, but I know it's not all my fault. So I just wanted to put that out there for all you parents of teenage children. Okay, so then we get back to Jesus. So the true parents originally were supposed to be Adam and Eve. They didn't make it. So God planned to send the Messiah, the true parent, at a time that was where he could be received. And it only happened thousands of years later. And the reason for that is because God didn't want the Messiah to be born into an environment where he would be killed. And that is the biggest difference, I guess, between the ideology of this particular church and mainstream Christianity, is that we do not believe that God's intention was for Jesus to be born and to be killed. Because if that was the intention, then it would have been very easy to do that in Adam's family. And we could imagine that if Abel had been the Messiah, the second chance, the second attempt at bringing the true parent into the world, then mission accomplished. He got killed by Cain. But Abel wasn't the Messiah. The foundation for the Messiah had not yet been established in Adam's family. And it was only established thousands of years later, and that's when Jesus was born. So that's the purpose of the Messiah, to be the true parent of humankind and to show us by word and by example what it means to be a true man. And his wife, to show women of the world what it means to be a true woman. And as parents, to show us what it means to be true parents. So that is the purpose of the Messiah in a nutshell. So then the second thing I wanted to talk about is Jesus the man. What kind of person was Jesus? What did he look like? What did he sound like? And I'm not going to answer all those questions. What political views did he have? What did he like to wear? No, I'm not going to get into all that. But what I do want to get into is the idea that I grew up in a Catholic background, and a lot of the pictures or depictions of Jesus on the walls of the church were of this very slender, very slight, very kind of wiry-looking man. And I was always wondering, even from a young age, like, how could this guy inspire so many people to follow him to the death when it looks like, even though he's described as a carpenter, that he doesn't even look like he could even pick up a hammer, let alone wield it or inspire, workers to follow him. And I found this article online that really summed up my thoughts as a young child, because this man writing this, I think it's a man, actually yes it is a man, had the same feelings. And I just want to read this to you because it really summarizes the physique, the most likely physique of Jesus as a human being. So we know that Jesus was a Jewish man from a Jewish family and a Jewish people. These were people of the Mediterranean region, where the sun shines hot most of the year. From this, we can assume that Jesus was dark and swarthy, not the blonde-haired, blue-eyed man sometimes portrayed in European art. Next, Jesus was probably in his early 30s when he began his ministry. Prior to that, he had worked for a living. The early Gospels, written in Greek, refer to Jesus as having been a tekton, which is often translated as carpenter. But more correctly, the word tekton means a builder. From this, we can infer that Jesus may well have been skilled as a carpenter, a stonemason, an architect, and the other skills necessary to build structures. Since the electric handsaw and the forklift were nearly 2,000 years away in the future, we can be certain that the work was done with human muscle. There may have been a few beasts of burden around, but the sawing and placing of wood, the chiseling and hammering of stone, and the other tasks would have all been done with muscle and sweat. So even with today's tools, you see no wimps on a construction site. I love that. So now we have an image of Jesus as a man of labor. He was no stranger to hard work in the hot sun, and he required the physical build to go with it. He may have been short-haired and clean-shaven or not. He may have been big and beefy, or he may have had a hard and wiry build. But his clothes were rarely spotless, and he certainly did not look like the guy in the picture I saw as a kid. Jesus of Nazareth had fishermen as his earliest followers. Fishermen, as everyone knows, are not delicate souls. They are tough, hard-bitten men, and have come from time immemorial from time immemorial until today. A wimp is not going to impress them. Jesus convinced these men not only to drop what they were doing, but to follow him into a life of hardship even greater than they had already known, and they followed him to the death. He must have had a presence that inspired confidence in other men. If he had looked and acted like a wimp, those tough fishermen might have made short work of him. So now we can create an accurate image in our minds of Jesus the man, a man who inspired other men to do great things that they never dreamed to be possible, a man to follow. Whatever his physical build, he was a man who inspired thousands of others, men and women, to follow him as well. In other words, Jesus was a tough guy. So that was pretty good.
So true, Father.
Exactly. So, Jesus the man, physically very tough. Internally, he's a man of love. Jesus taught us what it means to be a true person, a person who is connected to God. Now, if you were to ask a New York cabbie, a New York cab driver, why are you so aggressive? They might say, well, if you're kind to people, it shows weakness. But this is not true. Jesus was a very tough guy. He knew internally that his mission was going to be exceedingly tough. He went into the temple one time in the book of Luke. It's describing his situation. And he went into the temple on the Sabbath, and he told the people there, truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in his hometown. So he's in Nazareth again after doing a 40-day fast, and he's in Nazareth, and he's telling the people in the temple, I know you're not going to accept me. No prophet is accepted in his hometown. And he says a few other things that really inspire their anger. And then it describes this. All the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. They got up, drove him out of the town, and took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built. in order to throw him off the cliff. And that's the way arguments were settled back in those days, I guess. But he walked right through the crowd and went on his way. So how do you think that was achieved? Hello. Thank you very much for wanting to kill me. Excuse me. Excuse me. Thank you. You know, you can imagine Jesus as a tough guy, right? He made his way through the crowd. How did that happen? It wasn't a polite crowd who moved out of his way. He basically must have fought his way through them, thinking to himself, I have to survive as the Messiah. I am here to do the mission of God, and I'm going to fight for it. Physically, spiritually, fight. So that's the kind of man of action, tough guy that he was. And it doesn't go into detail, of course, but I imagine there was a few fists being thrown in that situation. So Jesus is a man very tough. But the last section I wanted to talk about is the legacy and the significance of Jesus. And I think if you're like me, then when you think of the name Jesus and what he did for us, then you think automatically of his love for humanity, his tenderness, and his compassion. There's two ways to get people to follow you. One is at the end of a gun, using fear and coercion, and the other one is love. And which one do you think Jesus was a master of? There's a lot of evidence to show what Jesus was saying and how his attitude towards people less fortunate, etc. He didn't have very kind words for aggressive, domineering fascists of the day who were taking advantage of other people. He didn't have a lot of kind words for the religious leaders of the time. But he did have a lot of inspiration in his words for those who were seeking God. And the followers were willing to lead a life of hardship and follow him to the death. Now, 2,000 years later, we're living in a world where it has been greatly improved because of the legacy of Jesus and his love. And yet we still see tragedies happening in our world today. Recently we had the shooting in the south of California, near Los Angeles. Before that, a few weeks ago, we had the massacre in Paris. And I want to read to you a letter, an open letter, written by one of the victims' husbands. Because to me, this is the legacy, or this encapsulates the legacy that Jesus left behind 2,000 years ago. When Jesus died on the cross, he wasn't cursing his captors. He wasn't cursing and, he wasn't, he was dying with dignity, in other words. And it was the power of that offering of his life, knowing that his life was for the sake of others, and his death was going to be for the sake of others, that inspired Christianity as we know it today. And this open letter was written by a man called Antoine Léris. I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation. He's a journalist for a local outlet in Paris. And he met his wife, Hélène, 12 years ago, and she was killed on that Friday when Paris was attacked. And he's been left to raise their toddler son, Melville, on his own. So addressing the attackers, he wrote, "You won't have my hate." Extraordinary thing to say, right? You won't have my hate. On Friday night, you took the life of someone exceptional, the love of my life, the mother of my son. But I will not hate you. I do not know who you are, and I do not want to know. You are dead inside. If the God for whom you blindly kill made us in his image, then each bullet in my wife's body is a wound to his heart. So, I will not give you the gift of hate, even though it is what you were hoping for. Responding to hatred with anger and hatred would only be to fall to the same ignorance that made you the people that you are. You want me to be scared, to distrust my fellow citizens, and to sacrifice my liberty for security. You lose. I will play on. So he had to wait several days after the massacre, waiting for several days. He finally was able to see his wife's body, and he writes, I saw my wife this morning. She was as beautiful as she was when she left on Friday night. As beautiful as when I fell in love with her more than 12 years ago. Of course, I am devastated by grief. I will concede you that small victory. But that will not last long. I know that she will watch over us always, and that one day we will meet again in the paradise of free souls. Now it's just the two of us, my son and I. But we are stronger than all the armies of the world. In fact, I do not have any more time to waste on you. I need to go and get Melville, who is waking up from his nap. He is only 17 months old. He will eat his afternoon tea, as always. And then we will go. And then we will go and play, as always. And this little boy's entire life will be an affront to you by being happy and free, for he will not hate you either. Antoine Lery. That's the legacy that Jesus left us. A legacy of how to love your enemy and how to bring victory out of a tragic situation. Because that kind of response is hopeful and it breathes life into a deadly situation. And if we can all live the way Jesus has lived, if we can become like Jesus in some small way, if we can try to, for 24 hours, just have a faith like Jesus and have a substantive love like Jesus, caring and loving for others around us, then I'm sure that we can start to really appreciate the depth and the love that Jesus had for God and for this world. And that is indeed how a foundation for the Messiah is established. When Jesus was walking around on the earth, not everyone recognized him as being the Messiah. Why is that? Was it because he didn't have those glowing blue eyes that you sometimes see in those Hollywood movies? It was because not everyone was really striving to meet God and to live lives of goodness. But doing so means making a foundation for the Messiah. And that means faithfully trying to connect with God through prayer, through meditation, through reading the Word of God, and then trying to serve your fellow people. That's called a foundation of substance. And by making those two foundations in your daily life, you are creating what's called a foundation for the Messiah. In other words, you will then be able to recognize someone who's doing those two things perfectly. Only then can you recognize the value of the Messiah. And that's why only a few people were able to recognize Jesus while he was alive. But that doesn't stop Jesus from doing his mission and from laying the foundation for worldwide transformation, which is what he did. So the legacy of Jesus is through love, and I think we owe it to Jesus to try our best to become people that love God and love each other. Thank you very much.